My name is Marie, and I have always been terrified of being alone at night, especially in this old, remote house. But when I got my new job, my only option was to move to this place far from the city. I told myself, it's just a simple habit, Marie. Light a few candles at night, read a book, and you'll feel better soon. The first few nights were fine. The creaking of the woodwork or the howling of the wind through the old windows was a little scary but bearable. The real trouble started on the fifth night. That night, just before I turned off the bedroom light, I noticed something strange. A shadow, or rather, a shape, had fallen on the bedroom window. At first, I thought it was something shining on the trees outside or perhaps a reflection from inside the house. When I got closer and looked closely, I saw that the shadow didn't look like a tree or a regular reflection. The general shape, although vaguely, resembled a human being. But no one should be there. Outside my window, there was just a backyard that ended in a dark forest. I quickly pulled the curtain back, telling myself it was just my imagination. I was tired. I turned off the light and tried to sleep. But all night, I had the strange feeling that someone was watching me through the window. The next night, when I turned off the light again, the shadow was there again. This time more clearly, as if it had come closer. Tall, broad-shouldered, and something like a head. My heart clenched in terror. I didn't dare to pull the curtain back. All I did was turn on the light again and stare at the shadow. But just like the night before, the shadow disappeared. Up until that moment, I was still telling myself that maybe it was an illusion. Maybe something in the old house was playing tricks on my brain. But the truth was, I saw this shadow every night. And each time, its shape seemed to get clearer and closer. I decided to invite one of my friends, Clara, to spend the night with me. When I told her about the shadow, she laughed and said, "Mary, you've been watching too many scary movies." But that night, when Clara was next to me, something changed. The shadow appeared again, this time more clearly than ever. Clara, who was sitting on the sofa, suddenly stopped and looked out the window in horror. She said, "Mary, what is it?" Her words removed all the doubts I had left. Now I was sure that it wasn't just my imagination. It was something outside the house. We quickly turned on the light and drew the curtains. But as always, the shadow disappeared. Clara tried to be logical. Maybe it was a reflection or an optical illusion. This house is so old, but why does it only appear at night? Why every time I turn off the lights? She had no answer. The following nights, the shadow became clearer and more frightening. Sometimes I felt it move as if it were waiting for something. One night, I dared to take out a flashlight to check outside. When I stepped into the backyard, all I saw was the cold, endless silence of the night. But just as I looked out the window, a vague shadow was staring back at me from inside the house, from my bedroom. I felt my legs go weak. How could a shadow that was always outside now be inside the house? I ran inside and locked all the doors and windows. I couldn't sleep that night until morning. The next morning, I decided to get help. One of my colleagues, an elderly man named Mr. Harper, who was from the same area, turned pale when he heard my story. This house has been empty for years, but there are stories about it. Stories that no one likes to talk about. "What story?" I asked. He sighed and continued. "Years ago, a man who lived in this house disappeared into the nearby woods. People said his ghost came back home every night, looking for something." This explanation seemed ridiculous and unscientific to me, but I couldn't help but feel that there was something more than logic involved. The next night, I decided to wait and watch the shadow. I turned off the light and got a camera ready to take a picture. My hand was shaking when the shadow appeared, but I managed to take a picture. When I examined the picture, what I saw froze my blood. A vague face in the shadow. A face staring at me. I couldn't take it anymore. I left the house and stayed with Clara for a while. But even when I was away, I felt that the shadow was still following me. Everywhere I went, I saw a dark, familiar shadow in the mirrors, in the reflections of the windows. After a while, I returned home. I don't know why, maybe to fight my fear, but I wanted to know the truth. That night was my last night in that house. I turned off the lights and stared straight out the window. The shadow appeared again, but this time, a face with empty, threatening eyes was looking at me. I heard a whisper, something like my name, Ma. I didn't dare move. The shadow started moving and came through the window into the room. I don't remember anything after that. All I know is that when I woke up, I was in the hospital. My neighbors had found me unconscious in the house. No one knew what had happened. But from that day on, I swore that I would never be alone at night again.